Be seated.
Good morning, jurors. Good morning. See you all again. We saw each other yesterday afternoon. Has any member of the jury discussed the substance of this case with anyone, including among yourselves? No. Any member of the jury seen, read, heard, or overheard anything from any outside source about any aspect? No. The prosecutors may call their next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Daniel Anderson.
Right this way.
Walk right up to my car.
Just gonna ask you to stand behind the blue line and face the clerk.
Sir, if you'd raise your right hand for me, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the cause now in hearing shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you.
Come around. Make yourself comfortable in that chair.
Sure.
Good morning, sir. In a nice loud voice, could you introduce yourself to the jury and spell your last name?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Anderson, D-A-N-I-E-L, Anderson, A-N-D-E-R-S-O-N.
And sir, where do you work?
I am currently employed as a forensic toxicologist with NMS, Nancy Mary Sam Laboratories.
All right. And sir, in order to become a forensic toxicologist, could you tell us a little bit about your educational experience?
Sure. So I have a bachelor's of science degree from Colorado State University in 1988 and a master's of science degree from the University of New Haven in Connecticut in 1990.
All right. After you completed your formal education, sir, where did you go to work?
So in 1990, I finished with my master's and I immediately went from Connecticut to Los Angeles. And I worked at the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office for about 24 years.
Okay. And at the medical examiner's office in Los Angeles, sir, what were you responsible for doing there?
My primary duties was as a criminalist. Not only was I assigned to the crime scene unit at the medical examiner, where I would respond to death scenes and collect physical evidence from the bodies of the decedents, but I also was a forensic toxicologist there as well.
All right. Now, what is a forensic toxicologist, sir?
Forensic toxicologist is a scientist that basically analyzes biological fluids for drugs and poisons. Biological fluids can be blood, urine, any type of tissue taken from the body. And not only do we do the chemical analysis, but then we have to interpret what those results mean in context with the totality of the case and explain it to courts, attorneys, police officers.
In addition to testing biological samples, can you also test non-biological samples like liquids?
We can. Yes, we can.
So you said you spent, 26 years at the medical examiner's office in L.A.?
I spent 24 years there. I do have a 1-year stint at the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, making 25. And then I left Los Angeles County and went to Colorado, where I spent 6 years with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, also as a forensic toxicologist.
Okay. After leaving the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, where'd you go?
Where I'm currently at now, NMS Labs. So I've been with them for 5 years now. So in all total, I've put in 35 years as a forensic toxicologist.
Okay. Now, without getting into too much detail about it, how is it that you guys actually test these biological samples or other liquids for substances that might be in them?
Well, typically we're using validated methodology, methods that have been validated for the task at hand before testing any type of evidential samples. So, we use instruments such as a GCMS or gas chromatograph mass spectrometer, or more sophisticated instruments such as time of flight or TOF. You basically are sampling a portion of a biologic material, such as the blood, performing a chemical extraction on it to isolate drugs or poisons of interest, what you're looking for, and then putting them on an instrument, and the instrument provides data that we interpret and read.
Now, in connection with a particular investigation here in Massachusetts, were you asked to do some testing of substances in connection with that investigation?
Yes, we were.
Okay. And you were asked to test certain substances for ethylene glycol, correct?
Correct, very specifically.
Okay. What is ethylene glycol, sir?
Ethylene glycol is a chemical typically found in antifreeze. It's colorless, odorless, but it does have a taste. It does have a sweet taste to it. It's very poisonous if consumed. Hence why they tell you to don't spill it on the garage and let your dog lick it up. It can cause metabolic problems in your system. It will shut down your heart. It will shut down your kidneys.
And over the course of your career, 36-year career, have you had the occasion to test for ethylene glycol prior to this case?
Yes, I have.
How many times approximately have you tested for ethylene glycol?
Several hundred times. I mean, typically you're asked by the medical examiner to test for it if they're not finding a particular cause of death or if they have signs that are pointing to ethylene glycol poisoning or toxicity.
Okay. All right. Now, in terms of this particular investigation and case, sir, you were sort of asked to do the testing that you did in three sort of batches. Is that fair?
Well, actually 4 work orders or 4 submissions were provided to us.
Okay. All right. So let's start with the first submission. The first submission you received was blood that was sent to you by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner here in Massachusetts, correct?
Correct, in November of 22, yes.
Okay. And you were asked to test that blood taken at Anna Jake's Hospital from an individual named Leroy Fowler for for ethylene glycol, correct?
Yes, we were.
All right. And did you run that test that you described for us a few minutes ago, the GCMS sort of testing to see if there was ethylene glycol in that blood sample that you were provided?
Yes, I mean, it was using 2 instruments, but yes, we did test for it.
Okay. And what were the results of testing that blood for ethylene glycol, sir?
The results were 52 milligrams per deciliter.
Now, in December of 2022, you were sent additional samples for testing, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and those samples included a liquid from a Powerade bottle, a liquid from a RainX deicer bottle, and then a liquid that came to you it came to the lab here in Massachusetts in a specimen jar from a Fanta can, correct?
I mean, yes. I mean, that type of information was provided to us by the law enforcement agency. All the descriptors, yes. I mean, we receive it in a little container separate from what they receive it from, but
Fair.
A portion of.
All right. So now the sample that came from the Powerade bottle, was that tested for ethylene glycol?
It was, yes.
Okay. And what was the results of the testing of that liquid, sir?
2,400 milligrams per deciliter.
Okay. The liquid that was in the RainX deicer, what were the results of that testing, sir?
I believe it was 11 milligrams per deciliter.
Okay. And then finally, the orange liquid that you were told, and I know you don't know exactly where it came from, but you were told it came from the Fanta can. What were the results of the testing on that liquid?
We did try testing that twice, and the end result was the test was canceled due to like an interfering substance in our analysis. and thus we didn't offer any results for that particular piece of evidence.
No reason to believe that the interfering substance was ethylene glycol.
Oh, no, looking at the raw data itself, it didn't appear to be any ethylene glycol, but we could not make any formal conclusions on a report without the interferences, thus it was canceled.
Okay. And then finally, you were provided with 2 samples of liquids. One that you were told was from an unopened bottle of RainX deicer purchased by the Massachusetts State Police, and a second one that was a bottle of Antifreeze, also purchased by the Massachusetts State Police just for comparison purposes, correct?
Correct, I did.
All right. Now, with respect to the item that was identified as the RainX deicer, what was the results of the sort of the comparison testing that you did on that for ethylene glycol?
I don't necessarily remember the specific numbers, but it was very low amounts of, I believe, ethylene glycol and propylene glycol.
All right. And if I suggested to you that the results were 7.6 milligrams per deciliter of ethylene glycol, would that refresh your memory as to the amount of ethylene glycol that was present in there?
It's a small amount, so yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. And then with regard to the antifreeze that was tested by your lab, sir, do you remember the results of the testing of the antifreeze for ethylene glycol?
I do.
And what was it?
It was 120,000 milligrams per deciliter.
Okay. Now, sir, do you know what? Well, let me ask you, sir. You've used the terms milligrams per deciliter to describe the results of all of these testing, the amount of ethylene glycol in the liquid. What does that mean, milligrams per deciliter?
It's a weight per volume explanation. I mean, that's how the units are expressed. You know, you talk about milligrams. There's 1,000 milligrams in a gram. So I express it as, you know, when I say 2,400 milligrams, I could say 2.4 grams as well. The deciliter is an interesting volume. Deciliter is 100 milliliters or 0.1 liters. And so you start doing the math. I mean, you can express these numbers in many different ways with different types of units. It's just how the laboratory reports out.
And obviously, you try to keep all of the expressions of this measurement in the same units so that they can sort of be compared to each other more easily?
You try to, but I mean, the way it's expressed from NMS perspective versus what you look at it in the literature, you really have to do some conversions.
Okay. All right. Now, sir, are you familiar with a substance called the denatonium benzoate?
I am.
Okay. And is that a substance that NMS Labs tests for?
No, we don't.
Okay. And in the course of your career, have you ever tested for denatonium benzoate?
The bittering agent? No, I have not.
And would you ever recommend to an investigator that they test for it?
Objection. Well, let me hear the question, and then I'll rule on the objection. Would you finish your question, please?
Thank you. Would you ever recommend to an investigator that they test for denatonium benzoate if ethylene glycol is present?
Objection. Just a moment. Let me see counsel at sidebar.
Court's back in session. May be seated. Silence all cell phones.
We are going to, Mr. Anderson, just have a very brief voir dire. That you've been, a question was put to you, there was an objection. I want to hear a few more questions by the prosecutor and your responses to those questions, and I'll allow defense counsel to ask a few questions outside the jury's presence so I can assess whether I'm going to permit this particular subject to be testified to by you.
All right.
Mr. Camelio.
So the question, sir, was would you ever recommend testing for, I'm just going to call it Bitrex. Would you ever recommend to an investigator who is investigating an ethylene glycol case to test for Bitrex?
I mean, I would not. In my 36 years of conducting this type of work, I mean, our laboratory never tested for the bitterant material. You'd have to find a laboratory to test for such a thing. if that was going to be a recommendation. And so it'd be hard for me to recommend any type of testing where I don't even have a lab to do the testing for you.
So just, and I'm going to jump in wherever I feel need. Sure. So just as a logistical, mechanical matter, it's something that you may not even be able to pursue.
Well, for sure you can't pursue it unless you secure a lab that can do it. And then you have to ask yourself what the purpose is of doing it. I mean, you're basically trying to identify a source of the material that contributed to the ethylene glycol found in the person.
And so what does that mean? That it doesn't have a purpose? I'm not sure I follow you.
I mean, sitting here and in all my years of experience, I don't have a purpose for it. No, it'd be I mean, if I was trying to identify the source of the problem, I'd be going after the ethylene glycol as the main contributor, if that's the question at hand.
Mr. Camelio?
No, I don't. I think that covers it.
Mr. Scully?
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning.
Good morning.
So if an investigator came to you, because your answer is a little bit hypothetical, right? You would never investigate to an investigator, or you would never recommend to an investigator to test for Bittrex. That seemed to be what you said, right?
True. I mean, I'd ask the why question.
Right. And in this case, you were not asked whether or not to test for Bittrex, right?
Correct.
Okay. So it's a little bit of a hypothetical. You would agree, right?
I would agree.
All right, so if this hypothetical investigator came to you and said, we suspect that this person may have intentionally consumed antifreeze, and we think that there might be a bittering agent in there, and we want to know whether there's ethylene glycol in the sample, and we want to know whether there's a bittering agent, would you advise that officer to, one, we can test for the ethylene glycol right here, but since you want to know what is the bittering agent, we should look for another laboratory to see if there's somebody available to do that second test, so you have both answers.
Well, if that's the desire of the investigator at that point, again, I would ask the question why,
Well,
but I certainly can't help you.
Right.
My lab and myself can't help you in that situation.
This is a hypothetical investigator, so this
Okay.
one wants to know both answers, right? In the hypothetical I just gave you.
It appears so, yes.
Right, because in their investigation, they feel it's relevant.
Correct. In this hypothetical, yes, they feel like it's important.
They want to get to the bottom of, is there just ethylene glycol, or is there ethylene glycol and a bittering agent?
If that's the question at hand, yes. That's important to them, yes.
Okay, so there are no more questions. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, if someone said to you, an investigator, we have some question whether some liquid with ethylene glycol in it might have been consumed by a decedent unknowingly or perhaps knowingly, and so we're wondering whether there's a bittering agent in it which might shed some light on whether they would have known that something was amiss or not. What would be your response to that?
My response would be the assumption, we're all assuming that this person can even taste the bittering agent. I'm not even 100% sure that the entire population can taste it.
Do you have any particular expertise with bittering agent?
I don't. Okay. I don't. I'd have to do my own research to.
So you don't have any particular familiarity with how unpalatable it may make something?
True, I don't. And when you start getting into ethylene glycol being spiked into another substance to hide it or not hide it, then you start to wonder, even if you find the bittering agent, is it too dilute to even taste? And you'd have to go through that whole research of what is the minimum amount that 100% of the population can and can't taste. I mean, there's a lot of questions from a science perspective that I would have. If you had two sources of ethylene glycol, one had it and one did not have the bittering agent, I mean, you're not able to test for the bittering agent in the person, in the blood sample. So it's not like you can identify the source as being one with or one without because this person didn't have any in the blood. I mean, that would be another scenario. There's a lot of questions at hand.
Okay. And it's not something you've thought about before?
No. I've only had one other true poisoning case, poisoned by another with ethylene glycol in my career. Besides this one, this will be the second one.
All right. Any follow-up on anything I've asked, Mr. Camelio? Mr. Scully?
Just respect to that one other true poisoning case that you had with ethylene glycol, when was that?
Year 2000 out of Los Angeles. The defendant's name was Angelina Rodriguez. She's sitting on death row in California.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to permit the question to be put to this witness and the witness, Mr. Anderson, to answer in a certain limited fashion. I appreciate his responses to the voir dire questions, especially the ones that I put to him. It's clear to me that Mr. Anderson is very knowledgeable, thoughtful, and experienced, but Bitrex is not his field of expertise, either by training or prior experience. I will permit him to answer the question, would he have recommended, if an investigator asked about testing for Bitrex, whether that should be pursued. I will permit him to answer in two fashions that he laid out in his voir dire. One is no, his lab doesn't do it. No lab he's ever worked for has done it, and it may be difficult to find a lab that would do it. That's sort of a mechanical or logistical impediment to pursuing such testing. And two, just actually, I already really said it, but the other reason is because in all his years of working in various labs and medical examiner offices and at MSS and NMS, they've never done Bitrex testing. But I'm not going to permit him to start theorizing on why he doesn't think it would be efficacious if you found somebody to do it because of whether somebody might taste it or not, and people have different tastes and things of that sort, because I think it's beyond his realm of expertise or experience. He may certainly be cross-examined, Mr. Scully, about how many ethylene glycol cases he's had, how many Bitrex cases he's had or lack thereof. That's all fair game, but I will allow him to answer the question to that extent. And Mr. Anderson, I think you followed what I've said, correct?
I have, yeah, if I can remember it all, but yes.
So basically, with the questions put to you, the two things that I find are permissible and appropriate, and certainly within your realm of experiences, you're going to be hard put to find somebody who can do this, because nobody that I know has ever done that. And I don't recommend it because I've never worked at any lab where we've ever done this kind of testing. You may be cross-examined about how many ethylene glycol cases you've had to inform that experience, but that's fine. So that's my ruling. Let's bring our jury back in.
Thank you, Ron.
We're good to go, Bill. You can come right in.
Where is MSS?
NMS,
NMS.
Nancy Mary Sam.
Yes.
It's outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Okay. I find it very hard to say for some reason. I'm usually pretty good with words, but
Right.
that one I find hard to say.
Yeah, it used to be National Medical Services.
All right, for the judge. Be seated.
You're not catching what I have, I hope. Thank you for your indulgence, folks. We're ready to continue with the examination of Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, before we took that quick break, I had asked you, and I'll just repeat the question. Would you recommend Bitrex or denatonium benzoate testing to an investigator who was investigating an ethylene glycol poisoning case?
And your same objection for the record, Judge. Thank you.
Yes, and overruled, but all rights preserved.
Thank you.
And my answer would be no, I typically would not recommend the bittering agent test.
Why not?
Well, one, I mean, we don't have a lab, or my lab cannot test for it, and nor do I know a lab that can actually test for the bittering agent.
Thank you. Nothing further, Judge.
Mr. Scully.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I just have a couple of follow-ups on your work that you did for the Commonwealth in this case, okay?
Yes, sir.
So you were contacted to get involved in this case by someone through the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab, is that right?
Correct. We have a contract with the crime laboratory to submit their evidence to us, yes.
And so that contract involves multiple cases, is that fair to say?
It is in this case, yes, multiple pieces of evidence, yes.
Yeah. And do you do other cases in conjunction with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
Yes, we have.
Okay. How long has the crime lab been a customer of NMS Laboratories?
That I don't know specifically.
Okay. But they're a client, right?
They are. I mean, we have many clients throughout the nation.
Right. I'm just asking you about ours.
Again, I don't necessarily know the history of the Mass Police Department submitting.
Okay. And did you have some direct contact with a Massachusetts State Police trooper at the time, Lewis Williams?
Well, after all the testing was completed, or at least in the midst of it, yes.
Okay. So you know that name?
Trooper Williams, yes, I do.
Okay. So I just want to run through some of the test results, and I have a few follow-up questions with each one. The first one I just want to ask about is what was referred to on direct examination as the Fanta soda. This was the interference or the one where the testing was canceled. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So there was a sample that was provided, and is it fair to say that your lab undertook an attempt to test that sample to see if it had ethylene glycol present in the sample?
Yes, we were asked to look for the three glycols, or the glycol panel on that particular one. Usually before we cancel any testing, we'll perform the test. It fails. We'll perform it again to ensure that it just was not that particular batch or date, and it failed again.
Failed twice.
It did fail twice.
And that substance, did you ever find out what the nature of that failure was?
No, there was some underlying substance in that orange fluid or liquid that was causing some concerns analytically, where you look at it and it wasn't passing all the acceptable criteria that it needs to pass in order to be reported, and thus it was canceled.
Okay. So you don't know what the actual substance was that was tested, right? Even though we're calling it something from the Fanta.
Correct. I mean, in the field of toxicology, I mean, they call that a direct analysis. You're asked to look for three glycols. You go to look for those three glycols to see if you can detect them. And there was some underlying substance that was causing us some problems, analytical interferences, and thus it could be something else. And you're not looking to identify that something else. You just cancel it and be done.
Okay. All right. So that test got canceled. And another test that you had done, and these aren't the exact order that you performed them, but the other another test that you did was for a product that was identified as RainX, right? And this is the one that was sent with the three samples that were part of the case file connected to the Leroy Fowler. Is that right?
Oh, I'm going to need a little bit more descriptor because
Okay.
I'm not sure which one we're talking about.
Item 2-1.1 in your patient name for your lab.
Can you help me out with the result so I can identify?
It's 11.
That's an evidential number by Mass State.
Yes, you may.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Okay, what was that?
The results are the 11 milligrams per deciliter result.
Okay. And that was connected to item 2-1.1, right?
If you say so, yes.
I'll come back up.
Okay.
I think you can talk in shorthand, and Mr. Camelio will accept it if you say RainX from 108 Central versus, store-bought RainX, so we know which you're talking about.
That this result was the RainX?
He already testified to it.
Yes, but the RainX from 108 Central, correct?
RainX, yes.
Yes,
from the house.
so that's what, I just want to make sure the jury's understanding which one you're talking about, not the store-bought one, the one from 108 Central. So we all understand that, correct? All right.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. I don't plan on asking any questions, sir, about the store-bought products.
Okay, that's helpful too.
Just the ones that were directly involved with this case.
Thank you.
Okay. So one of the things that you put that in your report is that ethylene glycol is basically manifested in 3 stages when it's following ingestion, right?
If you're referring to the reference comment on that report,
Yes.
those are canned comments on
Okay.
every report that has an ethylene glycol result on
Okay,
it.
well, tell me if this is what you wrote. Following ingestion, toxicity of ethylene glycol is manifested in 3 stages, depending on the dose administered. Initially, CNS depression is noted, with signs including intoxication, coma, convulsions, and possibly death. Also, during this 1 to 12 hours post-ingestion period, metabolic acidosis and gastrointestinal disturbances can be noted. The second stage, 12 to 24 hours post-ingestion, is also characterized by cardiopulmonary disturbances, including tachycardia, tachypnea, and hypertension. In severe ingestions, congestive heart failure and circulatory collapse may be seen. The end stage of ethylene glycol toxicity is renal failure 24 to 72 hours post-ingestion, signed Daniel T. Anderson, forensic toxicologist. That's what you wrote in your letter about the results of the testing of the RainX in this case. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, that's my report. That's
Okay.
my signature.
And those are the exact words just above your signature. Is that correct, sir?
Correct. Those are a canned comment, reference comment put on all reports. Yes.
Canned, but you didn't submit something inaccurate and then sign it, right?
No, I believe that that's what it says, and I believe in what it says, yes.
Okay, so it's accurate, right?
Sure.
The other thing that you included in this report was an advisement that unless alternate arrangements are made by you, the remainder of the submitted specimens will be discarded 1 year from the date of this report, and generated data will be discarded 5 years from the date of the analysis performed, right?
Correct.
Okay, when you're saying you, that's the Mass State Police crime lab that provided the sample. This is an advisement to them, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Do you know whether arrangements were made by them to come and get this sample, which is the RainX we're talking about?
I don't know off the top
Do you know
of my
what
head.
happened to that sample?
I do not.
Okay. Another sample that was provided for you to look at was the sample, and you called it patient name 2-2.1, right? And this is the Powerade, the sample that came from the Powerade bottle in this case. And if we could get a stipulation to that from the prosecutor.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, it was tested. I don't know what this, I'm stipulating to.
I think you're agreeing that the test result he's about to ask Mr. Anderson about is from the Powerade.
As soon as I hear the question, I'm happy to.
And
Is item 2-2.1 the sample that was from the Powerade in this case?
Is that the 2400 result?
Yes.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, you're certain of it, right?
Well, I know I've issued a report with 2400.
Yeah.
I just don't necessarily know the police agency item number is corresponding to it. So if you're reading it and telling me it is,
Sure,
then,
I'll approach.
okay, thank you. 2-2.1 is the 2400.
Okay. Is that the sample from the Powerade that was sent to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And this 2-2.1 is listed on an NMS Lab form in your letterhead, and you gave it, this sample, that patient name, right?
Well, the agency gave it that patient name. We actually assign it a work order number.
NMS gave it that patient name.
No. The patient name is just dictated from the paperwork that we received from the police agency.
That's the NMS. It says patient name, NMS, and they call it 2.2-1, right?
Correct. And we get that information from the paperwork submitted by the police agency.
Now, the result that you found there was the 2400 number, and that's milligrams per deciliter, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what I'm going to ask now is, based on the sample size that you had, the Powerade, the sample from the Powerade that you tested, that we're just talking about, 2-2.1, what was the percentage of ethylene glycol that was in that whole sample?
Well, as I recall from the report, I think only like 5 milliliters sample size was provided to NMS.
Right?
However, I don't know the total amount that was confiscated as evidence.
But what
Thus,
about-
I can't assign a percentage.
So from the 5 milliliters, can you determine the percentage of it that was the ethylene glycol based on the 2400 milligrams per deciliter?
Not as I sit here right now. No, I can't.
Does it sound like it was about 2%?
I can't say.
Okay, that math is not something you're capable of doing on the witness stand.
I wasn't planned to be doing mathematics on the witness stand, no.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Now, the difference between the amount of ethylene glycol that was located in the deicer sample versus the amount that was located in the Powerade sample was significant, right?
The difference between those two,
Yeah.
from 11 to 2400,
Right.
is quite a bit. Yes, I would agree.
And the RainX is the much smaller sample, right?
Correct.
And the Powerade is the much bigger sample, right?
From a concentration perspective, yes.
Right. So there's no way, would you agree, that the RainX deicer was the sole source of the ethylene glycol that was in the Powerade that was tested, because the RainX deicer doesn't have enough ethylene glycol?
I would agree with that.
Okay. So there must have been some other source of ethylene glycol to get in that Powerade sample that was tested, right?
I mean, just from concentration alone, yes.
Yeah. Now, the Powerade sample that was submitted to you, was the sample itself ever tested to determine what it was in particular, whether it was actually Powerade.
What the actual matrix was? No.
So there's the sample that came from the Powerade bottle, was tested for ethylene glycol, came back at 2,400 milligrams per deciliter, but the rest of the sample, you don't know whether it was Powerade.
That's correct. I
You
mean,
don't know whether it was orange soda.
I have no idea.
Do you know what color it was?
I don't off the top of my head, no. I mean, it may say at the bottom of that report.
Okay.
It was some of the liquids were noted to have color to them, but I don't recall.
Okay. You don't recall the color. That's okay. And so you don't know what the actual rest of the liquid was, right?
I mean, in my experience, there's no way of testing whether it was Kool-Aid, orange juice, soda. We wouldn't be able to test for that.
Okay. Now, the same advisement that was contained in your report, the toxicology report that you signed about the destruction of the specimen that was given in relation to the other samples was given in relation to the sample connected to the Powerade sample as well, right?
Correct. It's a canned statement.
Yeah, so unless alternate arrangements are made by you, the remainder of the submitted specimen, meaning the Powerade specimen in this case, will be discarded 1 year from the date of this report, right?
Yes, and that goes with the client and the agreement with that client that NMS has.
They get this information provided back to them, and then it's incumbent on them to go get the sample if they want to preserve it, right?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, no such arrangements were ever made.
I didn't see any, no.
Okay. Now, you testified a little bit on direct examination. You had some testimony, we took a break, and you came back to it. And it had to do with sort of a hypothetical question that the prosecutor asked about, would you, if an investigator asked you to, would you recommend that they test for a bittering agent, right?
That's correct.
And your answer was that my lab doesn't do that work, right?
My lab, or I don't know of a lab that does.
And it might be difficult to find a lab that does that work, right?
Yes.
Now, you've also disclosed that you have vast experience in this field, but only one true ethylene glycol poisoning case that you've worked on, and that was a case in LA, Los Angeles, back in 2000, correct?
Correct. I
Okay.
said this during the break outside the jury's
Yeah.
presence, but yes.
Yeah. All right. And so, in this case, that was a hypothetical that the prosecutor asked you to answer about a hypothetical investigator, not a real investigator, because they never specifically asked you to test for it in this particular case, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And your lab doesn't do the testing anyway, so you wouldn't have been able to do it.
That's correct.
If they wanted that information, they would have had to have located an outside laboratory to see if they could do it.
That would be my recommendation, yes.
And that could be difficult to do, right?
Very difficult.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Camelio.
In that California case that you just talked to us about.
Objection. Have you seen it sidebar?
All right.
In that California case that you just referenced for us, sir, what substance did you test in that case to see if it contained ethylene glycol?
We only tested the decedent's biological material, so blood, liver, urine, gastric.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything further? I don't think so. I wouldn't think.
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.